Namaste. Amen and blessed be. Before I dive into this sermon, let me say thank you for bearing with me with my cold-ridden voice. Did you know that there are 14 different religious holidays in the month of December? Along with the Christians, this time of year, Jews, Buddhists, Muslims, and Zoroastrians all have major holidays to celebrate. Coming just on the heels of Thanksgiving, this time of year is rich with tradition and stories. So I want to talk today about the power of stories, whether they're religious myths or personal stories or our sense of national history. The stories we tell have tremendous power. Creation stories like the Garden of Eden or stories about the founding of a country lay the groundwork for understanding our place in the world. Other stories, like fables or parables, give us all a sense of what's right and wrong. And when we share those stories within a community, we gain a sense of a moral code together. Stories also have a power to heal. When we fondly remember the past, or when we work through challenging stories, there's peace to be found. Stories can be used to build worlds, to seek truths, and to heal. Of course, they're not always used in such loving ways, though. Stories also have the capacity to tear down worlds, to obscure truth, and to bring injury and death. More often than not, we treat stories as things that happen to us or things that are told to us. But they're way too powerful for us to take such a passive role. In this season that's rich in personal story and religious myth, it's worth paying attention to the memories we create and the stories that we share. If there's any doubt about the power of story, consider for a moment the relationship between Israel and Palestine. In May of 2018, these two communities recognized a 70-year anniversary. Depending on the perspective, though, it was a very different anniversary. Israelis celebrated 70 years of victories over repeated attempts to destroy it. At the same moment, Palestinians mourned 70 years of defeat, displacement, and occupation. Now, over these decades, politicians and diplomats have discussed various peace deals. They've focused on financial challenges and ceasefires, two-state solutions, and a ton of other logistics. Most of the time, the issues of faith, memory, and identity have gone largely unaddressed. Perhaps those issues of faith, memory, and identity are too challenging, even irreconcilable. But it's hard to come to any resolution without ever addressing the root of a conflict. Some argue that anything resembling progress depends on the ability of each community to acknowledge the other's story. That would mean Israelis acknowledging the shattering of the Palestinian people and the destruction of their homeland. It would also mean the Arab world acknowledging the shattering of ancient Jewish diaspora in the Middle East. 1 million Jews forced out, so that today there's scarcely a memory from Yemen, Morocco, or Iraq. Along with the story of each community's past comes the explanation of why it understands a particular territory as its home. And along with respecting one another's stories comes an understanding of the territorial claims of both people. Each can make a very good case for that land, but solving the conflict will require each side to contract its largest claims of territory. And each side must acknowledge the sacrifice that the other makes. Peace will require mutual sacrifice and mutual acknowledgement. I would never suggest that this is easy or that I'm the best resource or what a timetable might be. What I think is important, though, is that this ancient dispute is about more than money or maps. It's about cultural identity and stories and listening to them. Until the stories of both sides are told and truly heard, little progress toward a lasting peace will be made. Now, I know the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is a big, big story. I want to offer you another important story that may feel a little closer to home. I selected this morning's reading, the one that celebrates evolution, as a way of talking about a story that we share. While we all agree that evolution is scientifically the best description of life on our planet, there are different ways of telling that one story. For some, it's a story of competition and death, survival of the fittest. But the reading that we shared was a story of the emergence of life and love. Out of nothing arose life, and life grew to love. Even within the realm of science, we have choices in the way we describe events, especially events that none of us witnessed, events that are fundamentally unique, mysterious, beyond the scope of our human scale. Now, the Big Bang has never settled well in my consciousness. I don't think it's propaganda. It's just not been something that I could sink my teeth into as a significant story or a point of meaning. It may be because the metaphors that so often are used to describe that beginning depend on a violent, explosive sense of power. Explosions, chaos, noise. But the story can be told in a different way. The greatest minds of our world tell us that once upon a time, all of what is the universe, all of what we know and what we have yet to see existed in a single, mysterious, tiny unit. That mysterious unit was infinitely dense and infinitely hot. And then 13.8 billion years ago, it began rapidly to expand and cool and come together. Only through some incredibly complex equations can physicists begin to speculate about what that means. It's pretty far out there, far beyond our everyday comprehension. It even uses the word infinite in the scientific description. That original seed thing was infinitely hot and infinitely dense. Our attempt to apply human concepts to this moment are kind of all we have. It's a best effort, because we seek to understand because we seek to come to terms with it, we gave it a name, the Big Bang. But what's the first thing that comes to your mind when you hear the word bang? Perhaps a gunshot, or a car wreck, or a stick of dynamite. Sometimes when I think of that theory, I think of fireworks or massive explosions. But the events that occurred 13.8 billion years ago are truly inconceivable. What occurred in the beginning was more complicated and more powerful than all the nuclear explosions we could imagine. What if instead of a big bang, what if we started calling it a big birth? It's really not that big of a leap. In a short but powerful time frame, something deeply complex and beautiful was created. From an unimaginably small beginning, with the right circumstances, growth began to occur. And the universe began to organize itself into being. The Big Birth was a frighteningly powerful time. There was darkness and intensely bright light. It's a wonder things turned out the way they did. It was a baffling combination of danger and creation, beauty and pain to bring order into being. All this drama to create a beautiful, complex, growing existence with an uncertain but hopeful future. The Big Birth. You may have heard me describe this idea in a previous sermon. It's because this is a story I'm committed to telling. Part of participating in religious community is choosing the stories that you tell and how you tell them. The stories we tell have lots of power. Of course, not all stories are gigantic. Some are quite small and closer to home, especially this time of year. Every family that I know of has a collection of holiday stories that get told and retold over and over. It may be about a particular special gift or a meal that got ruined. Perhaps the most often retold holiday story in my family was the meal when the rolls caught on fire. My grandfather, having survived a couple of strokes by that point, sometimes was not very quick in the moment. One Christmas, as he was passing the basket of rolls, the paper napkin that lined the basket got too close to the candles on the table. In seconds, the basket of rolls was a flaming mess. My mom jumped up, grabbed the flaming basket, and threw it out the front door into the snow. It was one of the very few white Christmases we have had in Oklahoma. That's how we remember it was a white Christmas. To this day, probably 30 years later, it's nearly impossible to participate in a Thanksgiving or Christmas dinner around that table without hearing the story of flaming dinner rolls. The other story from my family is about gift giving and my dad. A long, long time ago, when my brother was, I'm guessing, 10 and I was maybe 8, my brother had a thing for fast cars. I don't know why, but that year he was really into getting a Ferrari for Christmas. Like that was going to happen. So my dad thought it would be funny to get him a sort of gag gift Christmas present. It was a picture of a Ferrari. My mom didn't think it was the best idea. The card on the box said specifically, "From Just Dad." I don't know what my brother thought of the gift, but at 8 years old, I certainly didn't get the joke. If my brother got a present from just Dad, then surely I must have gotten one too. Despite their attempts to distract me, I wanted to know where my present from just Dad was. Now, this was one of the first years that we had a camcorder in the family, unfortunately. So there's extensive footage of a deeply distraught 8-year-old me rummaging under the tree for my present from just Dad. Every year after that, both my brother and I each receive gifts from just Dad. It's a reminder of the specialness and the anticipation of Christmas for children. It's a reminder of a story that we share, a sort of miniature legend of our family's past together. Maybe that's why the movie A Christmas Story is such a popular phenomenon. You know, the movie with the leg lamp and the Red Ryder BB gun? Maybe it's popular because we relate to the sense of nostalgia and family. There's a reading that I often turn to this time of year. It's called Christmas Children. I'll share the whole thing with you in a little bit. In this poem, the writer digs into the complicated, multiple layers that often come up during the holidays. Rather than being one particular moment in the past or what we're experiencing now in the present, Christmas comes to us as a wild conglomeration of memories. As more and more years pass by, we collect more layers of deep joy and gratitude. Of course, not every Christmas is perfect. Some have been sad and lonely. And there's a certain complicated feeling that arises when we witness the sheer number of years gone by, both bad and good. As the poet describes it, the sadness of too much memory unwrapped. The poem opens with the words, "I suspect the Christmas spirit is memory." The Christmas spirit is, in fact, a multi-layered conglomeration of personal memories, an ancient story of the birth of a child, narratives of shopping and gift-giving, family recipes that have been repeated and refined. The Christmas spirit is a remembering and retelling of so many different stories. As we wade through those stories, I want to invite you to not just hear them and repeat them, but take on the role of curator and storyteller. We don't often think of ourselves as storytellers, yet every day as we share with friends, we reconstruct a world of meaning. Every day as we store memories away, or retrieve and reinforce memories of the past, we're defining what is possible in our lives. Whether they're big or small, stories of the universe or stories of our favorite fragile Christmas tree ornament, they're incredibly powerful. They can build worlds or tear them down. They can heal or hold us back. So in this season of stories, let us be mindful of the healing or harm that we invoke in our celebrations. Amen.